Okay, I think I'm going to kick off. To me, we're ready to go?
Yes, we're ready to go.
Excellent. Well, firstly, hi everyone. I'm Craig. I'm the CTO at GTconsult. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about modern document management in SharePoint. We're going to talk about best practices, adoption, and AI. And I find it hilarious that we're still talking about this because, well, SharePoint's been around for 25 years this month. And I'm sad to say I was there on the first year. So it feels like I've been talking about this topic constantly through that entire experience. But I suppose that discussion only really came about when I started looking more at SharePoint in 2007 and 2010 with the inclusion of things like metadata and approval cycles and the like. But it's still very topical, and it's very topical because of the fact that it's important for this new age that we're moving into, and the new age being AI, because it's very important to have your documentation structured in a manner that is useful for AI. So today we're going to be going through those best practices and adoption. I'm going to do live demos. If you've ever seen me present, I always do live demos. So yeah, hopefully we've sacrificed the demo chicken and are ready to go. Okay, so let's jump into our presentation for the day, and let's start off with introducing myself. So hi, I am Craig. I'm the co-founder of GT, CTO, Complete Geek, and I get involved in all sorts of things. For my sons, I have two children, 15 months apart, so I know all about efficiency, and hence why I'm talking about document management, because, you know, it's all about efficiency. I live in Cape Town. I am a 5-wing-4 if you go by Enneagrams, and complete swag hag. In fact, you will always see me wearing GT stuff, mostly because I get it for events, and that's what I do. So known for that around the office. Some of my interests: I'm a birder. I'm also into surfing, and please, if you want to get hold of me, you can contact me at GTconsult. Just in terms of today's presentation, it is all around Collab Days. So providing you as the community with information, and the only way that we grow as a community and get stronger is by helping each other out. So please, if you've got people who you think would benefit from these types of talks, invite them along. Okay, I am going to, whilst we jump through to the next slide, I'm actually going to turn off my camera so that you can focus on the specific slides rather than me. But let's start off with the context and business drivers around why we want document management within our business. So document management is consistently cited as one of the most persistent operational challenges in modern organizations. Despite the significant investments in collaboration platforms like Microsoft 365, the root cause is actually really the technology. When we look at some of the problems, instead we realize that it's actually a combination of human behavior, legacy habits, and poorly aligned governance models. So employees create and consume documents, and they do that at a great pace, and even the more so now when we're looking at AI. They do that across multiple channels, and those channels include things like email or Microsoft Teams and desktop and OneDrive and any external sharing tools like Google Drive and Dropbox, etc. What that means is that over time, this leads to duplication of data, which is a major problem. You've got uncertainty around the latest versions of documents, and there's a complete erosion of trust in the systems intended to act as the source of truth. So from a business perspective, the consequences are quite tangible. You lose productivity. Now, if you'll notice down there, GTconsult enabling productivity, we're all about productivity and making your lives easier as an organization. So what does that mean? Why are we losing productivity? Well, you're losing it through the time spent on searching. That might not seem like a lot to you, but if you take an organization and let's say you're looking for a document, take the average amount of time you spend trying to find that document and confirming that it's the right version. Now, that might take you 30 seconds, it might take you 10 seconds, it might take you a minute and a half. But take that number, times it out to every single employee and the amount of times they do this per day, and that amounts to a large loss of productivity across the year. The other area is operational risk, and that's caused by having outdated information. Now, that becomes more of a problem now with AI, where AI is generating information on a regular basis. And as we've seen from all of these models, it can go and grab data that's out of date and develop a document for you that is completely out of date. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone's watches the news and listens to the information around specifically lawyers, where they're citing cases that are incorrect, or the information's been incorrectly ratified, and now they're presenting their case findings in court, and it's causing a massive operational risk and cases getting thrown out of court. The other is compliance exposure, and that's related to having uncontrolled retention of documents. So we hear a lot of POPI and GDPR and the likes, and those regulatory frameworks are, and they might be industry specific, but they require organizations to demonstrate control over information and the life cycle of that information. Yet what we see in most environments is that they rely on informal practices rather than enforcing policy. Another major challenge is scale. So what works for a team of 10 users breaks down when applied to hundreds or thousands of employees, particularly when we're talking about folder structures, and those folder structures becoming deep and inconsistent. So as organizations are adopting AI and automations are happening, these problems become even more pronounced. So artificial intelligence systems, they're relying on high quality, well-structured and secure data to produce these reliable outcomes that we want. And when documents lack consistency, they don't have metadata, or they're incorrectly secured, well, your AI responses become unreliable or unsafe. So what the slide is trying to establish is that the center theme of this presentation is around successful document management, and it's not about forcing your users into a rigid system.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. It looks like Craig might be having some technical issues. I have reached out to him. If we could just hang tight for a sec until he returns.
So much for talking about systems. My call dropped. Sorry about that. Let me go back to my screen. Toby, where did you lose me?
So I think it was just the screen before this.
Okay, let me jump back there. Okay, so just in terms of the content that I covered there, mainly around why document management remains this business challenge, is really rooted around your users, not necessarily the tools that are provided. And this problem becomes exceptionally problematic now as we move into this AI and automated world, where your SharePoint environment should be aligning with the business needs, reducing friction, and creating a foundation for compliance, for collaboration, and intelligence at scale. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about SharePoint itself as a document management tool, because SharePoint is the underlying document management platform for Microsoft 365. It provides so much more capability than a traditional shared drive or basic file storage system. So what I'm talking about there is a area where you store your files. Everything is created in folders. They very deep. You just go and drop your documents into folders. Becomes a nightmare to find, becomes a nightmare to use that information. That's a traditional file storage mechanism. Here, what we're finding at its core in Microsoft 365 is SharePoint's designed to manage the content through structured metadata, and we'll have a look at that. Security, making sure that you've got security at a number of different levels, not just per document, but per folder, per site, per library, to make it a lot more controlled. And then lifecycle controls, rather than having just the hierarchical folders. So what you might not know is that every Microsoft Teams team, basically, it automatically provisions a SharePoint site. And all the files shared in channels are stored in SharePoint document libraries. So what does this mean? Well, it makes SharePoint the single unavoidable backbone of the document management strategy right across Microsoft 365. Its key capabilities include things like version control, checking in and out documents, content approval, audit logging. And it's also deeply integrated into Microsoft Purview, which is the tool for allowing compliance and retention policies so that you don't lose any data. And data loss, not just around deleting data, but also making sure that certain people can't download documents and the like. We're not going to go into Purview today, but definitely a whole topic there, Tumi, around potentially discussing. Importantly, SharePoint Search is metadata aware, and this means that it allows users to locate documents based on attributes such as a document type or a department or a status, rather than remembering a storage path that the document belongs in. SharePoint's also integrated seamlessly with things like Power Automate. Now, this allows you to enable workflow automations for approvals, notifications, and classifications. But quite importantly, Power Automate is one of the backbones to Copilot Studio, allowing you to automate agentic AI processes. So very important integration there. From the security standpoint, SharePoint supports granular permissions. So what does that mean? It means that right down to a file level, you can provide security to an individual. We don't like that, but we'll get to how you should actually be setting up your permissions. It also provides sensitivity labels. So those labels govern the life cycle of the document by saying how long it can be under retention for, also whether people can download it, whether it should be shared or not shared. We also have conditional access. The nice thing here with the conditional access is you can share documents within SharePoint that are secured with people outside of your organization, and that could be either through allowing them to log in or through anonymous access for specific time periods. Yep. Also, ensuring that your documents are protected consistently, regardless of how and where or who actually accesses them. So understanding SharePoint's role here is critical, because in misusing it as a simple file server actually completely undermines these capabilities. And when I'm saying misusing it as a file server, that would be picking up your files from a folder location and dumping them into SharePoint is not the best method with which you handle document management. So when organizations embrace SharePoint as this content platform rather than a folder repository, they unlock this improved discoverability, they reduce risks, and it actually creates a readiness for advanced capabilities such as Copilot and generative AI. So this slide kind of positions SharePoint not as an optional tool, but as the strategic foundation for modern document management in the Microsoft ecosystem. Okay, let's talk about some of the document management models, because I think this is quite important to understand before we jump into the demos. So what you'll see is organizations, they typically adopt one of three document management approaches. And they do this in SharePoint. We've seen them all. Some we like, some we don't. The first is folder-based. The second being metadata-driven. And then the third being a controlled hybrid of the two. Now, the folder-based model basically mirrors your traditional file servers, and it relies on nested folders to organize content. And while this approach benefits from familiarity, so your users know how to store documents in that fashion, and there's low initial resistance, it does not scale well. And it often results in deeply nested structures that obscure content rather than organize it. But also, if you ever get into a situation where you now need to migrate data, you will find that you have massive problems. And when your libraries get oversized, this structure is absolutely terrible in terms of restoring data. And the deeper your folders get, remember, you can only play with 256 characters in a URL. So those can get overly sized. So the next is metadata-driven management, and this takes a fundamentally different approach. It's one that we absolutely love, and it applies a descriptive attribute to documents. So think about a descriptive attribute as a document type, maybe a client name, a project, or some confidentiality level. What this allows is a flat library with multiple dynamic views, allowing the same document to appear in different logical groupings. And that's done without duplication. So I can have the same document in different views, but used in a completely different way. Where this falls over is that a lot of people will sync their document libraries. And when they link all of the metadata together and now want to show that document library in their file explorer, that doesn't necessarily work so well. So the reason being because you don't have any structure in that view. You only have metadata when you're looking at the data in SharePoint. When you go into a file explorer view, everything is flat. And if you're dealing with thousands of documents, it can feel completely unwieldy. So that's where the hybrid model comes in. And a hybrid model might use high-level folders quite sparingly, and it combines with those folders with metadata to provide both visual comfort and functional flexibility, which means that now I can sync the folder. I've got some basic folder structure, but I'm using metadata for all of the benefits that brings about. The choice of the model that you use should be intentional, and it should be aligned with your business complexity rather than a user's preference alone. So let's take as an example legal once again. Legal and compliance heavy environments, they benefit significantly from metadata and content types, whilst smaller teams probably might rely on simplified documents, folder structures. But remember, quite crucially, meta-driven approaches are essential for automation, for compliance, for enforcement, and AI readiness. Systems like Copilot depend on metadata to signal and determine relevance and context. So I think from the side, what I wanted you to get is that there's no single universal model, but there is a wrong approach. And that wrong approach is ungoverned growth without design. Successful organizations, what we see, they define clear standards and evolve users towards the metadata-centric practices over time. Okay, so let's jump across into a live demonstration, and I'm going to show you a little bit of document management within the SharePoint environment. And hopefully you can all see my screen changed over to browser here. And we're sitting in GT Turbo Demo, which is GT's demo environment. And what you can see here is a well-structured page with a document library in it that shows a bit of metadata. Some of the metadata, like a title, content type, telling us exactly what type of document this is, when this document was modified, who it was modified by, and what version of the document are we on. But let's actually jump across to the actual underlying document library that this page reads off of. So when we move across to this document library, what you'll see is that we actually have a lot more metadata. We have when these documents were created, who they were created by, what the division these belong to, whether there's a sign-off status, an approval status. These are all different types of metadata that are now made available to us in our view of documents. Now, within SharePoint, you have the ability to look at version history. Now, this is quite important because what you'll find in any normal file server that you're just saving documents to, if a document is overwritten, that document is gone. So what do people normally do? They create a name for a document, and then they create a naming conversion with a version number afterwards so that you get an idea of the changes in versions. What that means is that you've got multiple documents all containing the same information with slight adjustments and version number changes. So when you move into an AI process, well, how does that help us? Well, it doesn't, because now you've got 15 documents with all of the same information in them, and the AI will struggle to tell you which is the relevant data. Whereas in SharePoint, documents are overwritten, and every time they're overwritten, a version is created. And that version, you can open, you can view, you can restore it, or you can delete it. So it keeps a backup of all of the information and when it is overwritten. So much better version control. Some of the other functionality that we have here is the ability to manage your access. So this can be done, as I mentioned, at a document level. We don't particularly like that. Reason being that if I have a document with granular rights, so let's say someone comes in and they give Craig rights to this ABC company document. What happens when Craig leaves the organization and John takes over from Craig? Well, then they have to go and find everywhere that Craig has access. So that doesn't work as a strategy. What you would prefer to do is at a site level, you would give people access, and you would generally do that through an intra ID group. And based off of that, they would have access into the specific document libraries, which means that when you want to go and change, when Craig leaves the organization and John joins, you just go to that intra ID group and add John to the same intra ID group, and voila, gets all of the same access that Craig had. You can also manage alerts around this document, which means that if I wanted to, I can set up alerts for when a document changes. I might have a number of other options, like looking at the properties, which are all of these bits of metadata, or checking out the document. So where does the check out and check in work? Well, this is for a structured document where you don't want multiple people working on the same document at the same time. It works counterintuitively to how you would set up document sharing in Teams, where Teams, you actually want people to collaborate around documents. And I think it's quite important to understand that in Teams, you have unstructured documents. You're not worried about metadata and the like. The Teams documents are where you are sharing documents amongst team members and collaborating on them. When you have a finalized document, think of things like a policy or a procedure, a stored operating procedure, whatever it might be. Those are managed documents, and there you want to make sure that only the last version is visible by people, and you want it visible to everyone across the organization. That's where structured documentation comes into play, which is where we store things like content types and versions and approval cycles. So check in, check out is quite important there, because on a structured document, you might want to check out the document, work on it until you're ready, check it in, and then that version can go for approval. Approval is managed either directly through SharePoint, and there have been some amazing updates in terms of the approval process, excuse me, directly in the SharePoint document library. But for something a little bit more intricate, you want to start integrating in your Power Automate. And the nice thing about Power Automate is it can go and look up a division, and then from the division figure out who the manager is, and then send that document to that manager for approval. But workflow is a whole nother topic that we will get to. Content types. Okay, so we're seeing a bunch of bits of metadata. So what exactly is a content type? Well, a content type is a type of document, and depending on the type of document, you might store different data for that document. So as an example here, we've got a functional spec, or we've got a cost estimate. So how are these things set up? Well, let's jump across into site content types. You get there by going to the site settings. You need to be an owner of the site to set any of this functionality up. But let's take as an example, we're looking at functional specs. Let's open up that functional spec. And based off of the functional spec, we can now start adding columns to that functional spec to capture metadata. So what would some of the fields be for a functional spec? You might have a client's name, you might have a project name, you might have a number of different pieces of information that you want to store against that functional spec. Would you need the same for a cost estimate? Well, probably not, although you might also have a client name and a project. You might have the cost and who the approver is as different pieces of metadata. The beauty with SharePoint is that you can store multiple content types in a single document library and then show the metadata specific to that content type to make sure that you're capturing the data. Okay, so one of the things that people are going to say is, well, this is a pain because now every time I upload a document, I have to fill in metadata. And that is a change. Most certainly. It is a change. It's a change that everyone hates. But when they start to see the benefit of it, then suddenly they will turn around and go, well, why weren't we doing this from the start? But there's certain mechanisms that you can put in place to ensure that you are making people's lives easier. And the first one I'm going to point out is document sets. So you'll notice this weird little icon here. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see this a little bit better. And so you'll see this weird little icon here with Green Apple Farms. That is what we call a document set. So think of document sets as folders, but they're so much better than folders. One of our problems with folders, and one of the reasons why I say to you that a folder approach to storing documents in SharePoint is a bad idea, is that firstly, folders cannot have metadata stored against them. Secondly, they do not form metadata for your search criteria. So if I had a bunch of documents under Green Apple Farms that I wanted to search for, I would not be able to use the search term Green Apple Farms unless it appeared in the document in some way, shape, or form. Once we put that into a document set, well, a document set is a clever folder that allows you to store metadata against it, and that metadata is pushed down to all of the documents that are filled into that location. What that means is that I'm now saving a lot of time in uploading documents by automatically capturing data from the document set down into my documents. So that is our first method of cleverly capturing metadata. But now, why do we want to capture metadata? How is the metadata helping us? Like if I take this document library with the divisions and the versions and the content types, how is metadata helping us find that document and use that document? So let's jump across to search. And to give us a bit of a better experience, I'm just going to go back to 100% here and show you a small search component. Now, this might not look like your normal search in SharePoint. Maybe you're used to searching for information through the top bar. I want to show you a slightly different way that you can manage your search where your metadata becomes all the more important. Don't get me wrong, metadata through this top search is important. The reason being that every time you search for data within SharePoint, that data is brought back with relevance. And what I mean by relevance is that SharePoint needs to figure out which is the most important document that you might be searching for to push that up the list of your search results. Now, if you have metadata associated to the document, that becomes more relevant than any document where it finds the information in free text. So once again, folders don't have relevance because they're not metadata. Document sets are, and all of the fields underneath that become quite relevant. So when we are searching for documents, this is a small example. We've got 24 documents here. If I wanted to find all documents that related to the design division, all I have to do is click one button and voila, I've got all of my documents that relate to the design division. Now it's picked up the metadata as division and therefore given me a list of the potential documents that I might want to find. At the same time, you can use the existing metadata, things like what is the file extension. So if I'm only interested in Excel documents and then I'm only interested in nanotechnology, in 2 clicks, rather than doing any fancy searches, I've already taken my results down from 24 documents to 3 documents. It's showing me all of the documents that relate to that division and that Excel file type. Now, this search, granted, is not your out-of-the-box search. What we're using here is the SPFX search. It is a component that was created by Microsoft staff to deploy onto your environment. You can deploy it for free, and it has so much functionality in terms of filters and different results that you can show. You can have tabs for different types of results. You can really create a functional search that helps you find information a lot quicker than your typical search at the top. And this is pretty much for more structured types of documents where you've got things like metadata. Let's actually show you an example. I'm going to jump across to a customer site where we've taken this to another level. So this is a shipping company. They have a number of different sub-companies. Based on those companies, they might want to create a type of document. So it could be a debit note or a delivery note or an invoice, just depending on what that is. So let's go to delivery note. And what you'll see here, let me zoom in a bit, sorry, a little bit small there, is we need to start capturing metadata, things like company, supplier IDs, delivery note numbers, invoice numbers, and upload our attachments. If I went and jumped across to a job card, well, then you'll notice that the fields that are required change. Now, we've taken all of this and put it into a number of different SharePoint sites and then provided search against those documents. And here we've got 89,000 documents sitting here, and I want to now whittle this down to a couple just using search filters. Well, based off the information that we've given them, they've got a number of different filters. They've got contract numbers, container numbers, credit notes, counterparties, bill of ladings, etc. So based off of that information, I can then go and filter information according to whatever is available in the site. So let's take as an example, I'm just going to choose one here. So based off of that one click, I've gone down from 89,000 documents to 2. Here are my 2 relevant documents that belong to that specific term. So much easier way to find documents, and I'm guaranteed that I'm going to find it in there. If I needed to now add in a bit of search in that, I can go Clermont, and this should bring me back just one item because now it's doing that filtering and it's searching through the documents. I just chose Clermont because I saw it in the name there. But rather than if I typed in the term Clermont, it might bring me back loads of different documents, and then I can also filter. So you've got those 2 ways of finding data, but you can see there from having 89,000 documents getting to one document in a split second. So much easier way to start finding documents within SharePoint. Okay, we have now looked at the views, we've looked at metadata. Let's show you some other good uses of metadata. So here we are, let's go back to our project documents. And I spoke to you about having the ability to slice and dice data based off of your metadata. So here we've got the list of all documents. What if I wanted to see all of those documents, but grouped by division? So I've got a view grouped by division. I don't have a folder called division. I've got metadata called division. These are my two documents that are in advanced materials, under analytical systems, etc. One of the things that you'll notice here in this view is that there are no folders. There are even those green apple folders are gone. And the reason for that is I've identified that in this view, I do not want to see folders. So it extracts all of the data outside of folders and presents it to me in this structure where it groups all the information by division. Now, that would be great for me if I were interested in all of the documents based around my division. Maybe I'm interested in having a look through to see what's been stored. But let me put my hat on as a project manager. Now I want to see everything by project. I've got a view grouped by project. So easy way, it's still showing the same data, but in a completely different view, utilizing the metadata. And in this case, it's actually just filtering on title because our project name's in the title there. And now I haven't actually changed the documents to only show documents. Now I've also got the underlying folders in there as well. And then if I put on my hat as an administrator, maybe I want to see what's been approved, what hasn't been approved, rejected, etc., so I can keep all of my documentation up to scratch. Okay, the final thing is then permissions. So what we saw was at a document level, you can assign permissions, but also at a library level. You can go and assign permissions for the document library where you can break inheritance. You can assign who should have rights in there. And this is the best way to start managing your documents, not at a file level, but actually at a group level where you pass in groups of information or groups of people so that they have access into your documents. But what you would have seen as I was jumping through the item here was, let me go back to project documents because I might have flitted past too quickly. Was that for this document library, I can also set sensitivity levels. So in this case, this is project documents that only internal staff should see. So this is company restricted data. Now you can create a whole list of different types of labels that define things like your retention policies. So whether documents should be in the system for 5 years, for 10 years, etc. You can also define who has access to those documents and whether they can be downloaded or not. So company restricted data, I cannot send to anyone outside of the organization. And in fact, I cannot download it to my PC. I can open it on my PC, but I cannot print the information, and you can set up those types of rules utilizing Purview. So really great use of information. Now, we spoke about the approach of having a folder structure versus metadata versus a hybrid approach. And I mentioned to you that you can sync your data to your file explorer. So in terms of that, let's go quickly and jump across to File Explorer and have a look at the data. Now, when we open up this document library in our File Explorer, it shows us all of the documents sitting alone as standalone documents, and that's because they haven't been uploaded to a document set. Items that have gone into a document set look like a normal folder. But what you'll also notice is there's no metadata. And this is just the view that you get through File Explorer, which is why often it helps to have things like the folders with, or in this case, the document sets, because now if I open up that folder and drop a document in here, it's automatically going to get all of the metadata from that document library. But at the same time, it's a little bit more structured when I'm looking at this view, having these essentially folders to structure my page. Otherwise, if I had 1,000 documents in here with no folders, just metadata, it would just show all of those documents. So not ideal there. Okay, finally is because the first thing you're going to say is this is all great if you've set it up from scratch. What if you've got a bunch of document libraries which already have data in them and you don't have metadata? So let's go across to our operational playbooks here. And these are actual operational playbooks at GT, and those were set up with very much that structure in mind, where we did not have metadata and wanted to store something like a department against the documents. Excuse me. So now is where we start coming in with AI, and we get all excited because you'll notice this department has a funny little double star next to the column. Now, what's that all about? We've also got a processing status where it says finished. Well, let's go and have a look at this column. This is not your typical column. The first thing that you'll notice is, yes, it's a single line of text, but look at this. We've got this autofill down below, and that's set to on, and we've got a prompt, and the prompt goes and decides what should go into this column. So identify the team that the playbook document applies to. Example teams are support, development, security, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a test for the prompt. So let me pass through a document, and I'm going to grab the, I don't know, the security document and test that. And this actually tests the prompt that I've written against the document that I've passed in, and it's come up with a result saying this is for the security department. So that result might be right for me. If not, well, I can go and change my prompt to try and make sure that I'm getting the right data out of it. What that means, though, is that I can start creating metadata columns and then go and process them by clicking on the classify and extract data. Obviously, this requires some additional licensing in terms of pay as you go to utilize the AI tools, but is an easy way that you can start creating the metadata that you require on very large document libraries that are already in place, and you might want to now add metadata to them. Finally, once everything is in place, we can start utilizing AI to find the documents better. So let's take as an example our policy finder. I'm going to say, how much leave do I have? And this is now going to go through all of my policy information and assess, based off of the question that I've asked, which documents I'm trying to look for. Because we save all of our policy data with all of the relevant information, this information gets pulled out, and hopefully we will see once Copilot goes through the generation here. Oops. Actually gives me a reference to that SharePoint document. So that's all about the leave procedure, because that's going to our HR site. It's going to the leave procedure page and identifying all of the information based off of the metadata that we capture. But let's say we had a more distinct process that we were running in AI, and I'm not going to go through a whole AI demo here. But let's take as an example this internal process. I'm just going to grab a conversation that was had and show you what the outcome is. Okay, let's take this this conversation as an example. So this is a process whereby the AI is questioning me to generate a document. In this case, I'm trying to generate a proposal. So here I'm saying which type of proposal do I want? And I say, oh, I want an 18 proposal. It says to me, okay, great. Do you have a functional spec? I upload my functional spec. It goes, great. It's got that information. It now goes and extracts all of the information that's required to create a functional spec. But when it creates it, it says to me, hold on, what's the client name? So I put in the client name. Okay, great, got it. Who's submitting this? Because it might be that I'm creating the document on behalf of someone else. So I said Craig on the 7th of March, and then off it goes and it generates my document for me. But that document is only good if I can then show it to other people. So let's actually see what the outcome of that is. I'm going to jump across to our proposal generator. And within our proposal generator, here's our Western National document, and it's captured the amounts, who the person is, what the client is, what the contract name is, etc. So it's extracted all of that data so that now if I get run over by a bus, well, then Trevin can come on and he can grab all of that information and can find it very easily because it's all presented with the relevant metadata in our document library in SharePoint. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of why we are doing this. Let's jump back to our presentation. And actually talk about the best practices and governance. So best practices in SharePoint around document management focus primarily on sustainability, usability, and governance rather than short-term convenience. And what I'm talking here, short-term convenience is generally someone will say, let's just move all of our documents from the file server into SharePoint. So one of the most important principles is to design this for scale. And you do that by limiting the number of document libraries and avoiding deep nested folders. Your metadata should be meaningful, but it should also be limited to what's necessary. You don't want to capture 20 pieces of metadata against a document and then never use them. It just becomes a waste. It also needs to be supported by having sensible defaults. And you can have those defaults either baked into the document library or baked into something like a document set, which means that some of that is automated, or you can use AI to minimize that user friction by using things like a prompt column. Your governance must be established early on. And so when you're deciding to create your site for document management, you need to think about including rules for the site. Things like naming standards and ownership accountability. But quite importantly is security design, because you should prioritize site level permissions and sensitivity labels and rather avoid the item level permissions that quickly become unmanageable. I think there was talking about, the Craig having access to a document versus John now joining the organization and needing to take over from Craig. Versioning and approval settings should actually align with your business risk rather than just having a blanket policy. Versions do carry on or delta information, which can escalate the size of your document library. So you want to sometimes minimize the amount of versions that are set, and you don't want approvals to be too restrictive. Quite importantly is training and adoption strategies. These should be based on your scenario. You teach users how SharePoint helps them to complete real-world tasks and shows them more efficiency instead of just listing features that could be useful. I think quite importantly, governance needs to be communicated as an enabler rather than a constraint. And what you need to do there is emphasize reduced rework, faster access to information, improved collaboration. And hopefully from what you're seeing on the slide reinforces the fact that best practices are not about restriction, but about creating an environment where users can work confidently, organizers can maintain control over their critical information. Quite importantly is people and change management. So what we see normally is when we try and introduce the document management, we get resistance to document management because what we find is that common objectives are perceptions that metadata slows down work, that folders are simpler, that new systems reduce personal control. And these concerns are often rooted in past experience with poorly designed SharePoint environments or change fatigue from continuous system rollouts. So what we find is effective change management starts by acknowledging these concerns rather than dismissing them. And demonstrating personal benefit is obviously key. So showing how that metadata helps, how it helps in AI. And automation here plays a critical role. So in reducing resistance by minimizing the manual data entry. So the use of those AI columns as an example. And that also enforces your rules invisibly. Now, your executive sponsor has to be critical in this process and has to lead from the front to ensure adoption. Your enforcement should also be gradual. So moving from guiding people to moving to a policy that users become comfortable with. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what you need to do in terms of overcoming that staff resistance. So AI in the future. AI obviously fundamentally changing the value proposition of effective document management in SharePoint. If we look at Copilot, it relies on structured, well-secured content to generate accurate and trustworthy responses. So what we see in badly managed environments, documents are poorly classified, they're poorly labeled, and they're not governed. And what Copilot struggles to do is then find that information, summarize the information, and it is fraught with inaccuracies. Whereas if we have proper summaries, we have information that we can extract quite easily, then natural language questions become a whole lot easier. So within those poor environments, it's extremely risky utilizing AI because your SharePoint permissions model, it ensures that AI respects the existing access control. So if you have poor security, it prevents users from seeing information that they really aren't accessed or authorized to. Beyond Copilot, if you're using Power Automate, AI Builder, or Copilot Studio to classify documents, extract metadata, and build custom conversations, it becomes quite important to make sure those are in a structured manner so you don't end up with a spaghetti of information. So I think what's most important around this slide is AI readiness. It's not achieved by simply enabling Copilot licenses, but actually having a mature document management practice. And in this sense, AI becomes both a motivation and a reward for disciplined SharePoint governance. So what are the conclusions? My key takeaways here, I think the key message of this presentation is that document management in SharePoint is achievable, it's sustainable, and I believe it's essential for organizations seeking to improve productivity. It's also achievable for organizations trying to reduce risk and, most importantly, leverage AI. SharePoint should be treated as a content platform rather than a file server. And I think the importance here I've stressed with having metadata, having content types, and those form the backbone of this information architecture. Our best practice and governances enable the users to work faster, not slower. And when they're thoughtfully designed and well communicated, well, then you get a lot less resistance from staff. And staff is, as long as the progress is natural, can be assessed through automation and leadership support, you're on a good wicket. Finally, AI and generative AI amplify both the benefits and the risks of document management, making strong foundations more important than ever. So next steps is typically to include assessing current document sprawl, identifying high-value use cases, and actually piloting improved library designs before scaling out across your organization. This basically reinforces that document management is not a one-time project, but rather an ongoing capability that evolves with your business. And that is our presentation for today. Any questions that we've got on the line there, Tumi?
Opened the wrong thing. No, we don't have any questions in the Q&A, excuse me, but if anybody has a question, please, you're more than welcome to raise your hand, and Craig can hopefully answer while we are still here.
Well, I'll last 3 minutes. Otherwise, I'll give you 3 minutes back of your day to go and build out your new document library.
All right.
Nothing in the Q&A. Well, yeah. From my side, before Tumi takes over, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Obviously, if there is anything that you have questions about, you can reach out to me, Craig at GTconsult. Over to you, Tumi. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you everybody for attending. We really hope that you learned something. I know I did learn quite a bit in this webinar. If you do have questions, you're more than welcome to reach out even after. Like, you don't have to, you're not limited to this point in time. But we do remind you that we do have monthly webinars, so you can register for the next webinar. We will communicate on who the next speaker is and what the content is there. So be on the lookout for that. But you can register now. Just have it on your calendar so that you don't have to worry about it next month, and come and join us and learn again. If you can't wait until then, we do have MS365 training available. We have a waitlist going. So if you want video training in English, Afrikaans, or Zulu, you can also check that out and join our waitlist, and we will reach out to you regarding that. But otherwise, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Be sure to reach out if you want to provide feedback.
Document management.
Yes. So if you have any feedback or questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I believe you all have my email address. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.